Captain Sarah Mitchell stood in the hangar bay, watching as mechanics wheeled her A-10 Thunderbolt away from the flight line for the last time. The aircraft's distinctive twin engines and shark-tooth nose art had been her companion through 3 deployments, but budget cuts and modernization efforts meant the Warthog was being retired from active duty. Sarah had flown tail number 79-085 for over 8 years, through combat missions over Afghanistan and training exercises across the American Southwest. The A-10 had earned its reputation as the ultimate close air support aircraft, designed specifically to destroy enemy tanks and provide cover for ground troops. Sarah remembered her first time in the cockpit, feeling the raw power of the GAU-8 cannon beneath her feet, and understanding why pilots called it flying around a gun rather than flying a plane with a gun attached. The aircraft could take massive damage and still bring its pilot home safely, earning legendary status among both aircrew and the soldiers they protected. But military priorities were shifting toward multi-role fighters like the F-16 Fighting Falcon. The Pentagon argued that newer aircraft could perform close air support missions while also handling air-to-air combat and precision strikes. Sarah disagreed fundamentally with this assessment, knowing that the A-10's unique design made it irreplaceable for certain missions, but orders were orders. She had been selected for transition training to the F-16, a sleek supersonic fighter that represented everything opposite to her beloved Warthog. The transition meant leaving behind everything she knew about combat flying. Where the A-10 flew, low and slow, getting intimate with the battlefield, the F-16 operated at high altitude and incredible speed. Where the Warthog could loiter over friendly forces for hours, the Viper burned through fuel quickly and had to make fast attack runs. The philosophical difference between the aircraft reflected different approaches to air power, and Sarah wondered if something essential would be lost in the transition. Walking around her A-10 one final time, Sarah traced her fingers along the titanium bathtub that surrounded the cockpit, designed to protect pilots from ground fire. She counted the various patches and repairs from her combat tours, each one telling a story of missions completed and dangers survived. The aircraft bore scorch marks from a close call with a surface-to-air missile over Kandahar, and Sarah still remembered the metallic taste of fear when shrapnel had peppered the fuselage while she provided cover for a medical evacuation. Her crew chief, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, approached with paperwork, transferring the aircraft to the boneyard. The veteran mechanic had worked on Sarah's plane since her arrival at the squadron, and his eyes showed the same sadness she felt. Rodriguez had served on A-10s for 20 years, and he understood better than most what made these aircraft special. The relationship between pilot and crew chief was sacred in military aviation, built on absolute trust and shared responsibility for mission success. The official ceremony was brief and formal, with squadron leadership making speeches about progress and modernization. Sarah accepted her new assignment papers and shook hands with the appropriate officials, but her mind remained focused on the A-10 being towed toward the storage facility. She had requested to keep something from the aircraft as a memento, and Rodriguez had quietly removed the tail number placard when nobody was looking, slipping it to her during the handshake. That evening, Sarah sat in her quarters holding the metal placard bearing the number 790185, feeling the weight of transition ahead. F-16 training would begin in 2 weeks at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, where she would learn to think and fight in 3 dimensions, rather than hugging the earth. The challenge excited her as a pilot, but the warrior in her worried about the soldiers on the ground who would no longer have the Warthog watching over them. Sleep came slowly that night, filled with dreams of cannon runs and close calls, of grateful voices over the radio thanking her for keeping enemy forces at bay. Sarah had always known her military career would involve constant change and adaptation, but saying goodbye to the A-10 felt like losing part of her identity as a combat pilot. She wondered if she would ever find the same sense of purpose in a different aircraft. The next morning brought new realities as Sarah began out-processing from the A-10 squadron and preparing for her move to Luke Air Force Base. The administrative tasks provided welcome distraction from the emotional weight of transition, but every time she passed the empty spot where her Warthog used to park, she felt a pang of loss. Change was inevitable in military service, but some changes cut deeper than others. Luke Air Force Base stretched across the Arizona desert like a monument to modern air power, with F-16s constantly launching and recovering from its parallel runways. Sarah arrived on a scorching Monday morning, her car loaded with everything she owned and her A-10 tail number placard carefully packed in her personal effects. The transition from the close-knit A-10 community to the high-tempo F-16 world felt jarring, like stepping from a family gathering into a corporate boardroom. The F-16 formal training unit operated with military precision that made Sarah's previous squadron seem relaxed by comparison. Student pilots came from around the world to learn the Viper, and the competition was fierce. Sarah found herself grouped with pilots transitioning from other aircraft types, including former bomber pilots, transport pilots, and even a few other A-10 drivers facing the same forced career change. The instructors made it clear that previous experience meant nothing here. Her first glimpse of the F-16 cockpit revealed a cramped space dominated by digital displays and complex weapon systems. Where the A-10 cockpit felt like a truck cab built for durability and visibility, the F-16 resembled a Formula One race car optimized for speed and agility. The side stick controller replaced the traditional center stick, and the reclined ejection seat positioned pilots to better handle the extreme G-forces of high-performance maneuvering. Ground school consumed 12-hour days studying aerodynamics, weapons employment, and emergency procedures. Sarah discovered that the F-16's fly-by-wire flight controls made it inherently unstable, requiring constant computer intervention to maintain controlled flight. This design gave the aircraft incredible maneuverability, but meant pilots were essentially managing a computer system rather than directly controlling the aircraft like in the A-10. The philosophical difference troubled her more than she expected. The academic phase revealed how much she had to unlearn from her A-10 experience. Combat tactics that made perfect sense in a low-altitude, heavily armored attack aircraft became dangerous or impossible in a lightweight fighter. The F-16's speed and agility allowed it to survive through evasion rather than protection, requiring completely different threat reactions and mission planning approaches. Sarah struggled with concepts that contradicted 8 years of muscle memory and tactical thinking. Simulator training began 3 weeks into the program, and Sarah's first session in the F-16 cockpit mock-up was humbling. The instructor loaded a basic air-to-air intercept scenario, and Sarah found herself completely overwhelmed by the speed of events. The F-16's radar could track multiple targets simultaneously, while the aircraft climbed and maneuvered at rates that made her stomach queasy. She crashed the simulator twice during her first session, something that hadn't happened since her initial flight training years earlier. Physical conditioning became crucial as Sarah prepared for the high G-force environment of F-16 flying. A-10 rarely exceeded 3 Gs during normal operations, but the F-16 routinely pulled 7 to 9 Gs during combat maneuvering. Sarah spent hours in the centrifuge, learning to tense her muscles and control her breathing to prevent G-induced loss of consciousness. The physical demands reminded her that she was learning to operate a fundamentally different kind of machine. Night after night, Sarah studied performance charts and weapons employment procedures, trying to absorb information that felt foreign. After years of A-10 operations, her classmates seemed to adapt more quickly, having come from aircraft with similar high-performance characteristics. Sarah began to wonder if the Air Force had made a mistake selecting her for F-16 training, or if she was simply too set in her ways to make the transition successfully. The breakthrough came during her 4th simulator session when Sarah finally stopped trying to fly the F-16 like an A-10 and began working with the aircraft's natural characteristics. Instead of fighting the speed and altitude, she learned to use them tactically. The moment felt like learning a new language, when individual words suddenly combined into meaningful sentences. The F-16 wasn't better or worse than the A-10, just completely different. Her instructor, Major Davis, had flown both aircraft types and understood Sarah's struggle. During debrief sessions, he helped her recognize which A-10 skills transferred to the F-16 and which had to be abandoned entirely. Weapon systems management, threat recognition, and communication procedures remained largely the same, but everything related to flight dynamics and tactical employment required complete relearning. As the academic phase neared completion, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic about her progress. The F-16's capabilities impressed her despite her initial resistance, and she began to understand why the Air Force considered it superior for certain missions. However, she also recognized that the skills making her effective in the A-10 would take months or years to develop in the F-16. The transition was proving more challenging than anyone had predicted. The night before her first actual F-16 flight, Sarah took out the tail number placard from her old A-10 and placed it on her desk. The metal felt cool and familiar, reminding her of where she had come from and how far she had already traveled. Tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter in her flying career, one that would test everything she thought she knew about being a fighter pilot. The morning of Sarah's first F-16 flight arrived with typical Arizona intensity, the sun already baking the flight line at dawn. She completed her pre-flight inspection methodically, trying to calm her nerves by following familiar routines adapted to an unfamiliar aircraft. The F-16 sat low and sleek compared to her old A-10, its single-engine inlet giving it an aggressive appearance that matched its reputation as a fighter pilot's fighter. Major Davis would fly chase in another F-16, providing guidance and safety oversight during Sarah's introduction to the aircraft. The mission was simple by F-16 standards: takeoff, basic handling characteristics, some gentle maneuvering, and landing. For someone transitioning from the A-10, however, it represented a complete departure from everything she knew about flying. The speed differential alone meant reactions that took seconds in the Warthog now had to happen in milliseconds. Strapping into the F-16 cockpit felt like being swallowed by a high-tech cave. The canopy sat inches from her helmet, creating an intimate connection between pilot and machine that the spacious A-10 cockpit never provided. Sarah ran through the startup checklist, feeling the single Pratt & Whitney engine spin up with a whine that climbed to a howl. The sound was completely different from the dual turbofans on her old aircraft, more urgent and aggressive. Taxi operations revealed the first major difference in aircraft handling. The F-16's tricycle landing gear and lightweight construction made it dance across the taxiway with every gust of wind, requiring constant inputs to maintain directional control. Sarah found herself over-controlling initially, making the aircraft weave back and forth until she learned to use lighter touches on the rudder pedals. The sensitivity reminded her that she was now flying a thoroughbred rather than a workhorse. Tower cleared Sarah for takeoff on runway 21. Left, and she advanced the throttle cautiously while releasing the brakes. The F-16's acceleration was shocking compared to the A-10's deliberate climb to takeoff speed. Within seconds, the aircraft was racing down the runway at a rate that made Sarah's pulse quicken with excitement and concern. She pulled back gently on the side stick, and the F-16 leaped into the air with an eagerness that caught her completely off guard. The initial climb rate astounded her as the F-16 shot upward at over 6,000 feet per minute, a performance that would have been impossible in her old aircraft. Sarah fought the urge to push the nose down, reminding herself that this climb rate was normal for the F-16. Major Davis's voice crackled through the radio, offering encouragement and guidance as they climbed toward the designated training area. The desert landscape fell away rapidly, shrinking to a brown and tan patchwork far below. Level flight at 20,000 feet provided Sarah's first opportunity to explore the F-16's basic handling characteristics. The aircraft felt alive in her hands, responding instantly to control inputs with a precision that was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Small movements of the side stick produced immediate aircraft responses, requiring much lighter touches than the A-10's more forgiving controls. Sarah felt like she was learning to write with a different hand. The first gentle turn revealed another significant difference between the aircraft types. Where the A-10 banked slowly and deliberately, the F-16 snapped into turns with startling quickness. Sarah found herself behind the aircraft mentally, struggling to keep up with its rapid responses. Major Davis coached her through the radio, reminding her to lead her inputs and anticipate the aircraft's reactions rather than trying to catch up after the fact. Speed control proved equally challenging as Sarah discovered the F-16's tendency to accelerate rapidly in any descent or relaxation of back pressure. The aircraft wanted to fly fast, and maintaining precise airspeeds required constant attention and small control adjustments. In the A-10, Speed changes happened gradually enough to allow for corrections, but the F-16's acceleration curve was steep and unforgiving of inattention. The first practice stall demonstrated the F-16's docile characteristics at low speeds, but also highlighted how different the aircraft felt throughout its flight envelope. Where the A-10 provided clear tactile feedback through control buffet and changing control forces, the F-16's fly-by-wire system filtered most of that information. Away from the pilot, Sarah had to rely more heavily on instruments and less on the seat-of-the-pants flying that had served her well in the A-10. Recovery from the stall was immediate and positive, with the F-16 accelerating rapidly back to normal flying speeds. However, Sarah realized she had developed a split second of vertigo during the maneuver, something that rarely happened in her old aircraft. The F-16's rapid attitude changes and acceleration patterns were affecting her inner ear differently, requiring adjustment to new sensory inputs and spatial reference points. Landing pattern entry introduced Sarah to one of the F-16's most challenging phases of flight. The aircraft's clean aerodynamics and high approach speeds meant that energy management became critical, well before reaching the runway. Sarah found herself consistently high and fast on her first approach, struggling to configure the aircraft properly while managing the rapid changes in aircraft energy state. The first touch-and-go landing was firm but successful, though Sarah knew her technique needed significant refinement. The F-16's landing characteristics were completely different from the A-10's gentle approach and forgiving touchdown envelope. As she climbed out for another pattern, Sarah reflected on how much she had underestimated the challenge of transitioning between such dramatically different aircraft types. After 3 patterns and landings, Major Davis called for the final full-stop landing. Sarah's confidence had grown incrementally with each approach, but she still felt like a student pilot rather than an experienced combat aviator. The F-16 demanded respect and precision in ways that her old aircraft had not, and she realized that becoming truly proficient would require months of dedicated practice and learning. 3 months into F-16 training, Sarah began finding her rhythm with the demanding aircraft, though progress came in fits and starts rather than smooth advancement. Each flight revealed new layers of complexity that had been invisible during her A-10 career, from managing multiple radar contacts simultaneously to employing precision-guided munitions at high altitude. The learning curve felt steeper than anything she had experienced since her initial pilot training, but gradually the F-16 was becoming less foreign and more familiar. The breakthrough moment came during a basic fighter maneuver sortie against another student pilot. Sarah found herself in a defensive position, trying to avoid simulated missile shots while maneuvering her F-16 through increasingly tight turns. Instead of panicking or falling back on A-10 tactics that would never work, she suddenly felt the F-16's natural tendencies and began working with the aircraft rather than fighting it. The sensation was like suddenly understanding a complex piece of music after months of struggling with individual notes. Weapons employment training introduced Sarah to the F-16's impressive precision strike capabilities, a mission area where her A-10 experience provided valuable background knowledge. However, delivering weapons from high altitude at high speed required completely different techniques than the low-altitude gun runs she had mastered in the Warthog. The F-16's targeting pod allowed her to engage targets from distances that would have been impossible in her old aircraft, but the compressed timeline meant less opportunity to confirm target identification. Air-to-air combat training proved most challenging for Sarah, as the A-10 had minimal air-to-air capability and she had never engaged in true fighter-versus-fighter tactics. Learning to manage the F-16's radar while maneuvering against multiple adversaries felt like playing 3-dimensional chess at high speed. Her instructors emphasized that proficiency in air-to-air combat separated fighter pilots from attack pilots, and Sarah was determined to master this fundamental fighter pilot skill. The competitive atmosphere among student pilots pushed Sarah to excel in ways her previous assignment had not. F-16 pilots took pride in their elite status within the fighter community, and the training program reinforced this attitude through demanding standards and constant evaluation. Sarah discovered that her A-10 experience, while initially seeming like a handicap, actually provided valuable perspective on tactical thinking and mission planning that many of her classmates lacked. Formation flying in the F-16 required relearning basic skills due to the aircraft's different handling characteristics and performance envelope. Where A-10 formations flew relatively loose patterns to accommodate the aircraft's limited maneuverability, F-16 formations were tight and precise, with aircraft sometimes separated by mere feet during complex maneuvers. Sarah struggled initially with the mental and physical demands of maintaining precise formation position while managing other cockpit duties. Night flying introduced another dimension of complexity, as Sarah learned to operate the F-16's advanced sensors and navigation systems in darkness. The aircraft's head-up display and night vision capabilities far exceeded anything available in the A-10, but mastering these systems required hundreds of hours of practice. Sarah found herself studying technical manuals late into the evening, trying to understand the intricate relationships between various aircraft systems. Cross-country navigation flights allowed Sarah to appreciate the F-16's incredible speed and range compared to her old aircraft. Routes that would have taken hours in the A-10 could be completed in minutes in the F-16, fundamentally changing how she thought about time and distance in flight planning. However, the high fuel consumption rates meant that careful planning was essential, and Sarah learned to think in terms of time to target rather than distance to target. Emergency procedures training highlighted both similarities and differences between the aircraft types. While basic aviation emergencies were handled similarly, the F-16's single-engine and complex systems created unique failure modes that required specific responses. Sarah practiced countless scenarios in the simulator, building the muscle memory necessary to handle emergencies when time and altitude were limited. The training reminded her that fighter aviation always operated close to the edge of the performance envelope. Instrument flying in the F-16 showcased the aircraft's sophisticated avionics systems, which could automatically navigate complex routes and approaches with minimal pilot input. However, Sarah learned that over-reliance on automation could lead to complacency and loss of basic flying skills. Her instructors emphasized the importance of maintaining proficiency in basic aircraft control, even when advanced systems were available to assist. As Sarah progressed through advanced phases of training, she began to understand why the F-16 enjoyed such an outstanding reputation among fighter pilots. The aircraft's combination of speed, agility, and versatility made it capable of missions that would be impossible for more specialized designs. While she still missed the unique capabilities of the A-10, Sarah began to appreciate the F-16's strengths and her growing ability to exploit them effectively. The confidence-building process was gradual, but undeniable, as Sarah's flight grades improved and her instructor feedback became increasingly positive. Where early flights had been struggles for basic aircraft control, later sorties focused on tactical employment and advanced maneuvers. Sarah realized she was thinking like an F-16 pilot, rather than an A-10 pilot trying to fly a different airplane, a mental shift that marked her true transition to the new aircraft type. By the end of her 4th month of training, Sarah felt competent in basic F-16 operations, though she recognized that true expertise would require years of continued learning and experience. The aircraft had earned her respect through its demanding nature and impressive capabilities, and she looked forward to the advanced tactical training that would prepare her for combat operations in her new role as a multi-role fighter pilot. The announcement of the annual Luke Air Force Base pilot competition came during Sarah's final month of F-16 training, creating a buzz of excitement and nervous energy throughout the student pilot ranks. The competition would pit the top graduates from each training class against seasoned F-16 instructors in a series of challenging scenarios designed to test every aspect of fighter pilot skills. Sarah's classmates immediately began speculating about who would be selected to represent their class, and whether a former A-10 pilot could compete against pilots with traditional fighter backgrounds. Major Davis approached Sarah after a particularly successful training sortie, informing her that the squadron leadership had selected her to represent the student pilots in the competition. The news was both honor and burden, as Sarah realized she would be competing against pilots with years or decades of F-16 experience. Her unique background as an A-10 pilot transitioning to fighters made her selection controversial among some of her classmates, who questioned whether she truly understood F-16 tactics well enough to represent their training class effectively. Their competition format included air-to-air combat, precision strike missions, and complex tactical scenarios that would challenge every skill developed during F-16 training. Sarah threw herself into preparation with the same intensity she had brought to her combat deployments, studying tactical manuals and flying extra practice sorties to sharpen her techniques. She knew that her A-10 experience, while different from traditional fighter pilot background, had given her valuable perspective on combat operations and tactical thinking. Her first opponent in the air-to-air phase was Captain Rodriguez, a seasoned F-16 instructor with over 2,000 hours in the year, aircraft and multiple combat deployments. The engagement began at medium range with both aircraft approaching head-on, their radars locked in electronic combat as each pilot tried to achieve first shot opportunity. Sarah's heart raced as she managed multiple threats while maneuvering, her F-16 through high G turns that pushed her physical limits. The initial engagement ended with Captain Rodriguez achieving a simulated missile kill, but Sarah's defensive maneuvering had been impressive enough to earn respect from the judges. Her ability to maintain situational awareness while defending against multiple attack vectors showed the tactical thinking skills she had developed during A-10 combat operations. The debrief revealed that while Sarah's air-to-air techniques needed refinement, her overall approach to aerial combat showed promise and adaptability. The precision strike phase played more to Sarah's strengths, as the scenario involved supporting ground forces in a complex urban environment. Her experience with close air support missions in the A-10 translated well to high-altitude precision strikes, and she demonstrated exceptional ability to coordinate with ground controllers while managing multiple target priorities. The judges noted her natural feel for battlefield coordination and her conservative approach to weapons employment in areas with potential civilian casualties. Sarah's performance in the tactical scenario phase surprised everyone, including herself. The exercise involved a multi-threat environment with enemy fighters, surface-to-air missiles, and time-critical targets that required rapid decision-making and precise execution. Her A-10 background had taught her to think systematically about threat priorities and mission objectives, skills that proved valuable even in the fast-paced F-16 environment. The competition's most challenging phase involved formation flying, under simulated combat conditions, requiring precise aircraft control while managing complex tactical situations. Sarah's recent intensive training in F-16 formation flying paid dividends as she maintained perfect position while her flight engaged multiple adversaries. Her ability to contribute to formation tactics while maintaining disciplined flight discipline impressed the instructor pilots who served as judges. Word of Sarah's competitive performance spread quickly through the F-16 community at Luke Air Force Base, generating discussions about the value of diverse pilot backgrounds in modern fighter aviation. Some instructors argued that her A-10 experience brought fresh perspectives to traditional F-16 tactics, while others maintained that specialized fighter pilot training was essential for optimal performance. The debate reflected larger questions about pilot development and aircraft specialization within the Air Force. The final day of competition featured a complex scenario that combined all previous elements: air-to-air combat, precision strikes, and formation tactics in a single integrated mission. Sarah found herself flying as wingman to Major Thompson, one of the most respected F-16 instructors at Luke, in an exercise that would determine the overall competition winner. The pressure was intense, but Sarah felt more confident in the F-16 than at any point since beginning her transition training. The mission began with a successful air-to-air engagement, where Sarah provided effective support to her flight lead, using her radar and communication skills to help achieve multiple simulated kills against opposing fighters. Her tactical contributions were subtle but crucial, demonstrating that she had internalized F-16 fighting principles rather than simply memorizing procedures. The judges noted her growing integration into the F-16 tactical mindset. The ground attack phase showcased Sarah's greatest strengths as she coordinated multiple weapon systems to neutralize time-critical targets while avoiding simulated surface-to-air missile threats. Her methodical approach to target prosecution and her clear communication with both flight lead and ground controllers reflected the discipline learned during A-10 combat operations. The precision and efficiency of her attacks impressed even the most skeptical instructor pilots. As the competition concluded, Sarah felt a mixture of exhaustion and accomplishment that reminded her of her early combat deployments in the A-10. Regardless of the final results, she knew she had proven to herself and others that her unconventional background could be an asset rather than liability in F-16 operations. The experience had accelerated her learning curve and built confidence that would serve her well in operational flying. The award ceremony would take place the following week, but Sarah had already achieved her personal goal of demonstrating that A-10 pilots could successfully transition to F-16 operations. Her tail number 79-0185 placard sat on her desk as a reminder of where she had come from, but Sarah now looked forward to building new memories and achievements in her F-16 career. The competition had marked her transformation from A-10 pilot to fighter pilot. The award ceremony took place in Luke Air Force Base's main auditorium, packed with pilots, instructors, and senior leadership from across the fighter training community. Sarah sat with her fellow student pilots, trying to manage her expectations, while replaying key moments from the competition in her mind. The past week had been filled with speculation and informal feedback from various instructors, but the official results remained secret until this moment. Base Commander Colonel Williams took the podium to address the assembled crowd, emphasizing the importance of tactical excellence and professional development in modern fighter aviation. He spoke about the evolving nature of air combat and the need for pilots who could adapt to changing threats and mission requirements. His words carried special meaning for Sarah, who embodied the kind of adaptability he was describing. The competition results were announced in reverse order, building suspense as each category winner was revealed. Sarah's name was called for second place in precision strike employment, a result that filled her with pride given her transition from attack aviation to multi-role fighter operations. The applause from her fellow pilots felt genuine and supportive, marking her acceptance into the F-16 community despite her unconventional background. When Colonel Williams announced the overall competition winner, Sarah's name echoed through the auditorium with a clarity that seemed impossible. She had won the entire competition, defeating seasoned F-16 instructors and proving that diverse pilot backgrounds could bring valuable perspectives to fighter aviation. The moment felt surreal as she walked to the podium, remembering the day. Her A-10 had been retired and wondering if she would ever find her place in a different aircraft. The trophy presentation was accompanied by a detailed explanation of Sarah's performance throughout the competition. Colonel Williams highlighted her tactical thinking, precise weapons employment, and exceptional formation flying skills as evidence that the Air Force's pilot development programs were producing adaptable aviators capable of excelling across multiple platforms. Her victory represented more than individual achievement. It validated the concept that combat experience in any aircraft type provided valuable foundation for fighter pilot development. Major Davis beamed with pride as he watched his former student receive recognition for her exceptional performance. He had seen her struggle through the early phases of F-16 training, fighting against muscle memory and tactical concepts developed during years of A-10 operations. Her victory vindicated his belief that her unique background would eventually become an asset rather than liability in F-16 operations. The informal reception following the ceremony buzzed with conversations about Sarah's unexpected victory and its implications for pilot training programs. Senior instructors who had initially questioned her selection for the competition now praised her tactical acumen and professional attitude. Her success had challenged assumptions about the value of specialized versus diverse pilot backgrounds, sparking discussions that would influence training policy for years to come. Captain Rodriguez, the experienced F-16 instructor who had defeated Sarah in their first air-to-air engagement, approached her during the reception with genuine congratulations. He admitted that her unconventional approach to fighter tactics had taught him new perspectives on aerial combat, proving that learning was a continuous process, regardless of experience level. Their conversation reflected the mutual respect that had developed between Sarah and the instructor-pilot community. Sarah's classmates from F-16 training surrounded her with enthusiastic support, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine admiration for her achievement. The bonds formed during the challenging training program had strengthened through shared struggles and mutual encouragement. Her victory felt like a team accomplishment, reflecting the collaborative nature of military pilot development and the importance of peer support during difficult transitions. The next morning brought assignment notifications for the graduating F-16 student pilots, and Sarah learned she had been selected for assignment to an operational fighter squadron at Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina. The assignment represented the culmination of her transition training and the beginning of her operational career as a multi-role fighter pilot. She would finally have the opportunity to apply her hard-won F-16 skills in real-world missions. Packing her belongings for the move to Shaw, Sarah carefully wrapped the tail number placard from her old A-10 and placed it in her personal effects box. The metal plaque had served as a constant reminder of her roots in attack aviation, but now it would commemorate the journey from specialized attack pilot to versatile fighter pilot. Her transformation was complete, but the lessons learned from both aircraft types would guide her throughout her continued career. The drive from Arizona to South Carolina provided time for reflection on the remarkable year that had transformed her professional identity. Sarah thought about the mechanics who had maintained her A-10, the ground troops she had supported in combat, and the instructors who had guided her through F-16 training. Each person had contributed to her development as an aviator and shaped her understanding of military service. Arriving at Shaw Air Force Base, Sarah felt the excitement and nervousness that accompanied any new assignment, but also a deep confidence in her abilities as a pilot. The competition victory had validated her transition to the F-16, but more importantly, it had proven that adaptability and professional dedication could overcome any challenge. Her tail number 79 or 0185 would always remind her where she started, but her future lay in mastering new missions and new aircraft. The squadron commander who greeted Sarah at Shaw had heard about her competition victory and her unique background as a former A-10 pilot. He expressed excitement about having someone with diverse tactical experience join his unit, and Sarah realized that her unconventional path had become an asset rather than obstacle. The Air Force needed pilots who could think creatively and adapt to changing mission requirements. That evening, Sarah placed the A-10 tail number placard on her desk in her new quarters, positioned where she could see it while working on F-16 technical manuals and tactical publications. The juxtaposition represented her evolution as a pilot and her commitment to continuous learning. Her victory in the competition had silenced the doubts of others, but more importantly, it had given her confidence to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead in her F-16 career.